Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Alexandria Soccer's Tommy Park, who's done some amazing things with the club I know very well because my son played for Alexandria for several years. Coach, great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, sure, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me go through your background again. This is your third time on. Appreciate it. You're a DeMatha guy, and DeMatha they play soccer over there too. It's not just basketball, which people who were raised around here, it's all we heard about was DeMatha and basketball. But they're actually really good in football and soccer too. Went to University of Mary Washington and had a great career there. Um, I think you're briefly, if I remember, with DC United and did some other things, but you ended up, I think you actually were an assistant at DeMatha too, but you came to Alexandria and kind of turned that job into a career, did an amazing thing. Alexandria, I know when my son joined, it was not considered one of the top clubs in the area, even though it was a great club. We loved it. But it was definitely a neighborhood club and club with some great energy, which you've kept together. But you've done a lot of things there, like the futsal program, which was integral with foot skills with the outdoor players, but also became its own little program within a travel program, which has been amazing. MLS Next was a big move that you moved. A lot of area clubs were doing DA and other things, and you guys kind of went all in on the MLS Next on the early side. That's been a win for you guys. And then I know you got some other things that recently that we're going to talk about, like dugouts. I heard at some of the fields, which sounds cool. But coach, did I get most of that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's been almost 15 years now at ASA. So it has been a journey and, we've kind of rode the wave of excitement and passion in the sport, right? Of not just soccer, but as you mentioned, futsal too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that no one else in the DC area was really doing, at least at a big club. Well, look, the high school season just ended, which was a crazy time. There were some huge upsets, but as you know, high school soccer was important to you. You went to DeMatha. It's known for that. It's in the fall. It's a little bit easier. And we've talked
Yeah.
about that. We talked about that as well. It's in the spring in Virginia with prom, with graduation, with AP tests, with everything, and it's with tryouts for clubs. It's just a mess.
Yep.
But you've been trying to manage that for a long time. One thing I did notice, 3 or 4 years ago when we talked, there were maybe two Division One players on the All Met team in the spring. Cooper Noseworthy, and then I think Matthew Leonard, and that was it.
Mhm.
It wasn't that this year. I probably saw 18, 20 Division One players playing high
Yeah.
school. The level of play was unbelievably high. Has there been more of an equilibrium between clubs and high school, or is there better communication so players are at least their senior year are able to play high school? Have you seen a better coordination between club and high schools?
Yeah. I mean, look, just to put it out there, like as you mentioned, I personally had an incredible high school experience, not just in soccer, but wrestling,
Oh, that's
lacrosse,
right.
multi sports. I actually played soccer and lacrosse at Mary Washington. Um, Very much value having a well-rounded youth sporting experience. So I just kind of want to, share that from a personal standpoint. And, you know, professionally, as you mentioned, I taught and I was a teacher, high school teacher for 4 years, coached, and really understand the the unique experience that a high school season provides, right? It's a condensed, amount of time where you can really, ramp things up, and there's a tournament at the end, right? And I think that in itself is something that over a 10-month calendar in club is it's just different, right? Yeah, I think there's obviously we recently played our U19s played against LA Galaxy at the Soccerplex. I mean, there was hundreds of people there. Goals were celebrated in an exciting fashion. You had U.S. National team scouts to fans, right? Just people who were there catching a game. So I I say that because I think there's overgeneralizations of both club and high school. And I think that we do a disservice by kind of um, by doing that. And I think to your point, especially in our area where we have such a high concentration of not just soccer lovers in the youth side, but also high quality players. There are so many kids who play at a high level that I think this kind of fixation on obviously it used to be the DA, right? Now with MLS Next, and quite honestly, some of the U.S. clubs initially when they were in ECNL did not support high school soccer. Some at the coach level, and now they've gone the 180. So it's a cycle, right? This is all cyclical in terms of how high school soccer fits into the high school annual experience for the tier one player. Um, so that's the long kind of contextual piece of it. I think to answer your question, there are, I mean, just on the Alexandria team, phenomenal player. Stanford commit,
Love it.
like to absolutely to another probably 15 NCAA quality level players on one team. And you can go through every lineup probably in the area, and make that argument that there are a ton of high quality, from a largely Division three, but some Division one players on all these high school teams. So I think the communication between clubs and high school, I think there's in large part there's an effort from clubs to figure out a way to support their and connect with the high schools. Some have club coaches now. Many of these high school coaches have either coached club for many years or continue to and still do. Um, and I think that has obviously forced the issue, right? Those if you're coaching both, you understand the dynamics and the need for both, really. So I
Yeah,
do think it's improved.
yeah, it's a different experience, and it seems it's going to be interesting because I moved to Loudon, and now MLS Next is up here, so it's
Yep.
gonna be interesting to see how it changes because when it first comes, everyone kind of like, wow, how are we gonna manage this? And somehow in Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, it seems to have worked out. The players have gotten better. The MLS Next elite players are getting the best experience in the world, but the high school game doesn't seem to have suffered. In anything, it seems to have thrived. So I don't know what. Well, let's talk about this MLS Next and MLS Next 2. What is MLS Next 2? This is something I just heard about for the first time last year.
So as I said, I mean, a lot of this is cyclical, right? That there's obviously a high demand to be a part of the MLS Next platform. So, the folks at the league offices in New York, with MLS are trying to figure out a way to support being more inclusive into their competition platforms, recognizing there's still, you know, minimum standards, and they're trying to ensure that there's competitively appropriate, games. And it's tough to do that without a second tier, right? To kind of have this promotion, and they've promised that, if a team, a club is not performing to their standard, there could be some sort of relegation, um, which just again it allows for, what does a league do, right? They generally are scheduling, they're scheduling your games, and if they don't have the appropriate teams for your teams to play against, they got to figure out some way to adjust that. And I think expanding your platform um, makes it a little bit easier for you to evaluate clubs who want to be part of the top tier. That said, the MLS 2 platform is actually contracted out by six regional league management companies versus the tier one, which is run directly by New York City's, MLS offices. So that's MLS kind of recognizing that if they're going to successfully support doubling, or two and a half times the number of teams and clubs that they're supporting, they need folks at a more local level who have run leagues there and understand the geography and some of the club, development dynamics. So I actually applaud them for taking that step. Although, then you have six different companies and you're going to have a wide range in our big company, our big country of different companies representing MLS. So it's going to be a I don't want to I don't want to speak for them, but it feels like they're very much um, making a calculated effort here, but sharing that this is year one,
Yeah.
and that they're very hopeful that um, the clubs at the local level can work together to help improve it as well. It's not just a one way.
Well, we can hope for the best. I was a skeptic with MLS Next, and I was wrong. So, this this sounds like a
Yeah,
lot. What's going to happen to ECNL? Like, so one of the reasons why the competition was so strong in Northern Virginia high school this year was that elite Arlington team with all those D1 players had stayed together, and those players didn't play for MLS Next. So, but that was a great team. I know they'd beaten DC United. So many, I think they have at least 8 or 9 D1 players on that one little team. What's going to happen to ECNL? Is it going to remain as a viable organization?
yeah. I mean, Julie, you know me, man. Like when it comes to the defining a like, for example, you mentioned Arlington or other clubs that may or may not be part of the MLS Next platform. Arlington and other clubs who may not be can be fantastic clubs. They can have phenomenal coaches. I mean, there's tons of high quality players. Um, what's going to happen to me is that this will continue to be a cycle.
Yeah,
Our country, I mean, like clubs, and leagues, their priorities shift over time because of the growth, right? And how big of like MLS, for example, their priority as a league is to ensure that their pro teams succeed. They're spending a lot of money on the youth leagues. They're subsidizing it at quite a large expense,
I
which
didn't
is
know that.
awesome.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, their events cost million plus every event that they host, and they are not relying on the players, the clubs to subsidize that or offset that completely. They do a great job, which I think is disrupting the market for the good. I think some of the other leagues actually are on the opposite side of the spectrum. They're figuring out any and every way to profit, which if that money is going back to invest in the clubs and the player experience, great. If it's not, then it's tough to say that that's going to be a sustainable model over a long period of time because of the market disruption from MLS, which is more like a European model where the national federations invest in the youth and offsetting the costs, right?
mm,
So I think what you're going to see is more and more investment from leagues and or their sponsors, their partners, to figure out a way to encourage this participation. But what happens if a club's not immediately in it? Again, ECNL is still very, it's a robust league. There's plenty of competitively appropriate games if you're playing in there. I agree that right now the MLS Next platform consistently week to week offers the again the most consistent competitively appropriate experience. But who's to say in 5, 7, 10 years what the competition schedule is, right? And
mm.
that ultimately is what, again, back to what a league is. That league isn't defining whether or not our kids are getting a great coaching experience at our club. We define that. Arlington defines that. You know, Gunston, Lee Mount Vernon, there's a million clubs around. Those clubs define their culture, not the league. And I think we need to all change the narrative a bit when it comes to saying, hey, the league is defining your club, your club experience. You know how I'm passionate about saying, when we weren't in whatever that tier
We
one
couldn't even
league.
get in CCL for a while, Coach.
Oh yeah, we we got boxed out of CCL. So it's a great reminder. But we were pushing forward with great coaches. We've been on the other side of it, and so now that just because we're in a league that is at the top of the most competitively appropriate, I do not feel like that league is why our programming is quality. I've felt passionate that our programming has been high quality for a long time. And now people are taking note of it because we're in a tier one league.
Yeah, exactly. Coach, I would say that in Europe, I interviewed a kid named Josh Grand, one of Chandler's Dorada's teammates, Barca back then. And he
Yep.
said he went over to Holland to live for a few years, go to the American school, and he played in a like maybe a third tier type of club. Wasn't a pro club, but in Holland, the pro clubs are constantly having to play in open tournaments. So there's always kids in open tournaments or after their job, and it was a good way to keep the ambition alive for the players who weren't on kind of the pro academy type levels, and the players who were on the pro academy level had to really watch it because there were guys here that were very hungry to take their spot. So hopefully there'll still be some mixed tournaments when we can. Coach, one thing that one thing that's happened so often, and this is Richmond Strikers and the Kickers that just merged, which is strange to me. Now it's a Uniclub, and there's Braddock Road and this. They had, I mean, there was, it
Mm.
was McLean and SYC. All these clubs merged, NBA and Loudon. I don't know what that used to be. Maybe Loudon United. You guys have never really done that. What do you think about all these mergers? Is it still going on? And what's causing all those mergers?
In short, pressure from the leagues. Back to that. I mean, I don't think any of these clubs who wear a city across their jersey, city name, would choose to do that if there weren't there. And that actually goes back to the demand from parents. They're at the water cooler talking about what league their kid is playing in. They're not talking about what club or who their coach is necessarily. That may be the second or third or fifth thing that they talk about. They say, "Oh, my kid's in, MLS Next or GA." Okay. Well, like okay. Like they play that schedule of games. Well, is their team any good?
Yeah.
Is their coach awesome? Like, do they have aspirations to do this, that, and the other? Like, do they love playing? Like, I think those things happen. Sometimes the leagues actually mandate that those mergers happen, believe it or not. Um, and it really puts the clubs in a tough spot, because again, many of the clubs are nonprofits in our area, which is great. You know, and I think it puts clubs in a very awkward position when leagues are saying your teams aren't performing at a high enough level for this, and if you want to retain that, you better find that club over there with another 2,000 players to try to bump you up, so that those leagues can then go back and be like, well, our team over here beat that team in the other league, so we're better. So there's all these, there's all this. Now, competition's great. So I think, just I want to obviously I'm sharing a lot of critical feedback about the pressures that I think clubs face from leagues, but I also want to share that like generally speaking, having an environment where there is accountability to continue to figure out ways to advance your players to the highest possible level that they can play at, both at the individual and team level, is healthy. I mean, it's a sport. Like so we can't. I don't want to lose sight of that. So I just think that like clubs would have more time and energy to focus on the quality of their coaches and what their coaches are doing versus how to navigate all these like you said, mergers and we were asked to absorb a club a few years back on the girls' side. Um, and after we were felt like we were in a great spot to support that, but even that, it's a cultural challenge, right? When you try to bring, you know, different communities, whether that's, geographical difference, right? And the travel or people not going to the same schools and having completely different, like when you try to mesh these things together over a sport or over it almost never sustains. There's a few clubs that have, been able to figure out how to sustain it and do a good job, with it, but in large part, it's a 1 to 4 year pilot, and then it just people kind of go back to what they were doing.
It is all about the coach, though. It was in my own circumstance with my son. He was playing with Alexandria on the so-called red team, and he would moonlight with the white team, just get extra minutes. And it was Coach Maestro, Mike Mastro, who saw this non-slide tackling midfielder as a six, which is kind of outside the box, and it changed his whole career. And then that's what made him a player that was a better player. So it was Coach Mike who was on the so-called B team that really changed his arc as a player. And so it is the coach. Getting back to the girls for a minute, is there any more or less sense to be made of the girls' club structure as the boys that we've talked about the last 10 minutes?
Oof. Um, Definitely there's different dynamics on the girls' side, right? I would say generally there are, um, I just think from a statistical standpoint, there are fewer girls playing, um, in the area. Um, and I think there's, I think there's been a longer history, I think, of more like super clubs or super teams on the girls' side, fewer numbers of top, clubs that have been around and have kind of dominated that. I think in the last 5 years, post-pandemic, that has changed completely. And I think there's also more and more demand on the girls' side for higher level competition, more training, futsal. There's a wave of energy on the girls' side um, that did not exist as broadly as I think it does now,
Oh,
which is awesome.
yeah.
And I think, in many ways, we have seen the quality of play, the number of individuals interested in playing at the collegiate level, um, skyrocket, and I think, again, statistically speaking, we would have maybe one, two, three girls advance to play at the NCAA level. The last few years, we've had 12 to 15.
Wow, that's
And
incredible.
and I think in the next 3 years, obviously, we're joining the GA back to the league. So, again, people place a lot of importance on these leagues. And I will say, like, the college coaches have such a small amount of time and money to scout players. So they're only going to, these very few number of games and platforms. So it just makes it a little bit easier, right? If you're playing, it doesn't make it. It's not impossible if you're not playing in one of these leagues, and we haven't been playing. We have 12 to 15 going, but what we're expecting is another wave, right? Where you see some second team players now committing to play at the collegiate level. Um, so yeah, I mean, look, we're overgeneralizing everything, right? Because
Yeah.
these are very complex, dynamics within the boys and girls leagues and the club structure. But all in all, I think um, the demand for more training, more you know high quality coaches, more infrastructure continues to grow on this advanced side of youth soccer.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I saw something online that school year is coming back and they're going to go do out with birth year. We came to Alexandria, if you remember, because they changed they changed it from school year to birth year, and your whole '03 team was going to be
Yep.
destroyed because you had a real the let me get this right. Most of the '03 '04s, the better players were '04s, like Jeffrey and Harbin and all those guys, and Van der High, James, and all those guys. And then the '02, '03s, most of the best players are '02s. So you had a huge void in '03s, and you and Kev kind of talked about it. And we're hoping to get a whole bunch of '03, some Joker to come over. Turns out most of them end up going to DA, but Chandler did come over, and I'm so glad that we did. And we had a great experience there, as you know. But here we go again with the same type of disruption, I believe. So what is going on? Is it true they're going to change it again? Why are they changing it? And do you think it's a good idea?
Well, what's interesting is, we're one of the larger clubs, without a merger in the country. I think, and we haven't really been, we've gotten a couple surveys, right, from whether it's US Youth Soccer or um, some of the leagues have put some surveys out there and the state association as well. Um, but it's our country's massive, right? So the feedback from the states is that the grassroots participation is leveling off and or declining
Hmm,
on the recreational side.
hmm.
Um, the advanced side, however, we've talked a lot about that just now, has continued to develop and grow. And so what they're figuring and the feedback is that when a lot of clubs changed their grassroots programs to be in line with the advanced programs, kids weren't playing with, their classmates anymore. So there's a major push to get that back in line. So my sense is it's more of a grassroots and grow the game shift versus something about ODP and top level players. And what's interesting though is like clubs like some clubs like ours, we didn't change our recreational program.
Oh, you didn't?
We did not
Oh, I didn't
because
know
we were
that.
like, this doesn't make sense. And because we can control that aspect of it, we didn't change. Um, so I think again, a lot of these initiatives and a lot of the challenges are going to be in the advanced, side. Um, I think it's going to be interesting, right? Obviously, some of the leagues haven't quite settled on whether they're going to, also shift. Um, and I think that'll create quite a unique, you know, experience, especially in our hotbed area. Um, and so, yeah, I think we're feeling, we again, we understand that these teams are, I mean, your best friends, right? Like a lot of these people create lifelong friendships. And when a national governing body comes in and says, hey, we want to shift this just because like that, this is affecting us as a country, you're kind of like, well, who cares? Like, we just want to keep playing until like we go to college, right? Like, so I think there's gonna be a reckoning, again, and I'm concerned that there's gonna be a lot of folks trying to figure out how to take advantage of, if someone shifts or doesn't, and then there'll be a lot of pressure back on the player and the parent when there's these shifts to take a risk, right? And either be forced to make a change and hope it works out, right? Like it did for Chandler, or a lot of folks end up, losing that social connection. They may not land on that top, tier or within the top half of a team, and then they'll just quit. and I think something that was intended to retain and attract new players to the sport ends up having a counter negative impact. So look, I think as long as like we can we can get the information soon enough, it allows more structured and organized clubs to communicate well in advance and figure out how to do it. And then, but otherwise, I do think it's going to be a massive challenge. I'll use that word.
Yeah, I just wish they'd pick one and stay with it. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Like on the girls' side, especially, they really care about who they play with. Chandler could play with anybody, but oftentimes the girls really, it's important that they're on a team with good chemistry. So I think, I don't know, we'll see how it works out. I hope, I wish for the best as always. Just real quickly, are the clubs in this area going to all be on the same calendar year, or is that going to change on the same year? Is that going to
It,
change?
it's to be determined. It's again, it's based on the leagues.
Like, oh,
So
good. Okay.
so we're still, I think some of the entities have announced that it is definitely shifting, and then others are have not announced that yet.
Okay, so we'll see. Okay, to be to be
Yeah.
continued or to be
Check
announced.
back in a few months.
Yeah, take it back. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the what's going on with the Reds. Now, I know you guys. I believe you guys made the U.S. Open tournament and maybe even hosted a game last year or something. But huge, a huge feather in the Reds cap. What's going on with the Reds and what's going on with semi-pro, pro level soccer generally?
Great shout. So our Reds program, both on the men's and women's, we play on the women's side. We have two tiers of WPSL. On the men's side, we have UPSL and NPSL, and we have increasingly every year had more and more academy players either playing in it in the amateur platform to complement their youth academy league and or coming back from their collegiate experience to prepare for the fall. Um, and we've found that environment and adding in that option to play with men and women as a youth player is incredible. The quality continues to go up every year. Our Reds teams do exceptionally well, and are able to compete with clubs who exclusively play in these leagues and put all their focus on it. And we've been MPSL, champions. We've, as you said, qualified for the Open Cup and amateur cups. We aspire to continue to advance up the amateur platforms, and are considering advancing up another tier in the U.S. soccer, um, pro platform. I think a club, in a community like ours, as the sport develops, would be doing a disservice by not continuing to participate in the growth on the amateur and or pro side. A lot of these guys, I mean, you mentioned Jeffrey, you mentioned Van de Heij, you mentioned, some of, these guys are playing, whether it's with us or with USL teams. I mean, Annapolis, who was in MPSL last year with us, draws 75, 8,000
It's crazy.
a game. It's phenomenal. And there's more and more examples of like that in the league. You're playing in front of more people in some of these games than you do in your college environment.
Mhm.
And so I just there's it's a great experience for the kids who have an opportunity to kind of play up, and the adults who are coming back. And we promote players into, for example, Loudoun United. We have players going back and forth. If they're not quite making it there, we get a call. Hey, can they come play with your UPSL or MPSL squad? And then, oops, hey, we've had two injuries. Like, we need a center back.
Mhm.
We just saw your guy play last weekend. They're getting scouted in some of these games. And then, look, if they do well, they could be, called up. So I think there's more of an ecosystem developing that, again, matches, opens the door to more players to be able to find their way into a professional side.
Yeah. So Coach, Jeffrey, he did a gap year and he played a little MLS Next, but he was also very much on your pro outfit. I know a kid, one of Chandler's old Jogo teammates. He goes to GW, never played college, but has played for Nova FC since he's been in college. Really nice player. Do kids need to go to college to keep improving, or can they get that same type of experience at these types of leagues? Especially as you said before, you're going to upgrade. And I'm not trying to say to replace the college education
Yeah.
part. I'm just talking. I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the soccer itself.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go to college.
yeah,
It's still something that actually, I think when you talk to folks in Europe or South America or Central America or other, parts of the world, um, they're saying that's what's missing in their country is that, people are putting it all, obviously maybe from a national team development standpoint or producing more pros, but there are 99 examples for every one that makes it there, or 999 who don't have a college degree when they're, when they get turned down. And we have that. And many of our kids are getting great education. Let me just start with that. Second thing is, I do sense that with the development of these amateur leagues, you can get, a a more advanced experience. I do think that the infrastructure in college though is going to be tough to replicate because if you think about the investment in facilities that schools have, training staff, assistant coaches, college, fully paid, like the amount of resources that exist at a university are fantastic. But the level of play, I mean, many of these guys are either they've just graduated from college, so they've played at that level, right? And
yeah.
maybe are even just starting to hit their stride as a 23-year-old or 25-year-old. Um, so we have guys on the team who are, 28, 29 and have played USL 1, and are now working, but want to keep playing at a high level and maybe just have that last chance, to play in a meaningful game, right? And I think all of that means that if you are in a situation where you know, it's appropriate to take a gap year, you get to play 10 months at a relatively high level
Mm,
because we have winter cups. We have a men's and women's futsal pro team, so you could really play 11 months,
yeah.
and and it's a great experience. So it's gonna shift things a bit, I think, in the youth world too, because we've just you know put ourselves in this, okay, you got to do what that youth structure sets up. No, you don't. You can play amateur as a 17-year-old, like or 19-year-old and take a gap year and, with schools deferring so many kids and the pandemic backlog as Chandler and many of the kids since have experienced, like it's a real thing, like it's great to have.
It was awesome to see. I went to Robinson and Anthony Chong. They had an awesome team this year at Robinson, but they lost in penalties. And it was a heartbreaking game. But Anthony came back the next game and scored a goal for the Alexandria Reds. So
Yeah.
it was great to see him being able to get right back on the bike. And you would think, if he could score a goal for Alexandria Reds, it'd be easy to score in high school. Every team has got Anthony Chongs. I mean, it's like you
Yeah.
got Dylan Logan, you got Olvin
Yes.
Martinez, you got the guys from Lewis. But it's great that Anthony was able to get right back on the bike and get that goal for you guys. I was really excited to see that. Coach, one thing we're doing all this fancy stuff. We got pro soccer, we got MLS Next, all the things you've done. Have you been able to keep the Alexandria culture alive? The thing that I loved about Alexandria was you guys knew the names of all the people. You guys knew Jeffrey, you knew Harbin. You guys made sure they had ways to get to practice. During COVID, you had kids could come in and use the computer for school if they couldn't. They didn't have internet, Wi-Fi at home. Have you been able to keep some of the cultural all hopefully all the cultural values still alive, Alexandria?
Yeah, I think I love that. I appreciate. I know we chatted just a bit in advance. Like to me, culture, club culture is um, the number one thing people should be talking about when it comes to talking about youth soccer, talking about high school culture. Like the and for us, we talk about the Alexandria sporting, the soccer culture citywide. And that means us going into schools, U.S. Soccer through VYSA partnership there. We are going in for the next 3 years and delivering free soccer with uniforms, balls to every second grader, which means that 1,500 second graders a year are going to have a professional coach with professional referees, a pro player, an infusion of developing a love for the game and an interest in the game so that we can counter this like, okay, the only valuable experience in sport is at the elite level. Let's get folks excited around the World Cup, around, what we have going. So to us, that experience and retaining the grassroots, the introductory and intermediate level, and how powerful the sport can be in one's life. Um, has and making sure that there's a quality adult role model has always been for us, I think, like the vibe, the culture of ASA. Um, Celebrating our successes at the highest level and showing that there's a pathway within the community to achieve, to go to Stanford or to, play on a pro level team in front of your friends and family locally, um, or make a lot of money refereeing as a high schooler, and having your first job as a camp counselor to taking your first international trip. All of these things, it's saying, hey, how can a sport impact the community? And if there's a way for us to introduce that in a meaningful way, let's try it. And who can we work with to do that? So teachers, social workers, other nonprofit organizations, small businesses, large businesses who want to infuse and reduce the barriers to entry. Um, and then I think you know, finally, on our culture side, we feel like we want to have, and the best analogy I can give is we're essentially a private school that wants to have the best possible school in the country, which takes a massive amount of investment into your facilities, into your people, into your equipment. You mentioned our bench shields, our
Yeah,
pro level bench shields.
those are cool. Those are awesome.
Yeah, and those are tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. But
Oh, they
you show up
are
to the field now, you don't have to put a 10 by 10 tent that you were probably hauling in your car.
all the time.
So they're safer. Um, both, from a tent blowing away, they're also operationally sweeter. And then I think we want to, you know, keep that momentum going. Make it feel special for every time a kid comes out there. Because our recreational grassroots players play on the same fields. They're at Witter all day. Our 7v7 adult co-ed teams come out there. Now they have the bench shields to have, So I think for us, it's that like tots to adult to opening doors with jobs to making sure, next year we'll have almost $1 million of scholarship at the club.
That's awesome.
1 in 3 participants need some level of aid. Um, and that's the financial side. Then there's the carpooling. There's every team trying to make sure that there's a team culture that matches the club's vision of what that means. So I get excited about culture. I get excited about the people who define that. And as we've grown, it's absolutely more of a challenge, but I think we've still done a good job because of the people we have.
Yeah, when you talk about the car cultures, I remember Mr. Brown snaking through the neighborhood, the Arlington, the Alexandria apartment complexes every day to get kids to practice.
Yeah, thank you on their behalf.
Oh, it was a
That was
blast. Uh, so, Coach, tell us a little bit about the Access for All initiatives, and I know U.S. Soccer has recognized the club for that.
Yes, so the Access for All project breaks down barriers, you know, transportation to tuition to equipment and uniforms, to introducing the sport, to partnering with folks like the U.S. Soccer Foundation to introduce the futsal courts that we improved at various schools, to U.S. Soccer Federation, who is now funding that initiative to go into every second grade classroom for the next 3 years in an effort to grow the grassroots level. So, we actually have ASA Access for All, a website that highlights all of these, you know, initiatives that open the door. And obviously, our core programs and the ASA Academy and Rec and Adult League and TOTS international trips all are the programming itself. But it takes a lot to open the doors for that.
Yeah. Well, Coach, this has been great. Thanks for catching us up. We had a lot to catch up on today, even more than I thought. Thank you as always again for the great experience that me and my son had at Alexandria. It was just so much fun, and I met so many great people that I still keep up with today. At Alexandria, there are some wonderful clubs in the area, and Alexandria is very different, and it continues to maintain the culture values while doing great things on the soccer field as well. So anyway, congratulations on all the success, and thanks for doing that. Hopefully, next thing we talk, everything will be solved, everything will be perfect, and no more change needed.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me on and continuing to, bring folks onto a platform where they can share, because I think, um, part of the challenge is that, people sometimes don't feel like they have a voice, right,
Mm,
in the sport, and whether they're, you know, I know you focus a lot on the high school experience, whether they're coaching or playing at a high school, or involved in on the club side, or coaching college, right? I think, when you're giving folks to share, I think it helps educate people,
mm,
right?
thanks.
Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of, like I said, overly generalized, or conclusions made in our sport, and why don't we just do this, right? And it'll
Mm,
fix everything, And
yeah.
it's just like there, just in our area, there are hundreds of thousands of players who are playing structured play, that not even unstructured, folks that are within the Maryland and Virginia youth databases. That is a very challenging, um, beast to support. And I think the schools and the clubs have a responsibility to dialogue more and more. For example, shifting the spring high school season to the fall to
Yeah.
align with everybody would open doors, would address injury prevention, would allow for schedules to be deconflicted and coaches to do both
Allow kids to run
dialogue
track. Allow kids to play lacrosse in the
other
spring.
sports. So let's get the ADs on this podcast. Let's get them in. Let's start to ask difficult questions to the folks who can, really introduce change that has an impact on some of these, Virginia-based, DMV things. But I always love talking to you, and we were grateful to have you a part of our community and model to others what, supporting not just your own, right, and opening up. I think that's a beauty of the sport and sport in general is, um, people welcome others into their family and support those who may not have, and that you know that is something that I hope continues on as we are challenged just as a as a culture, as a country, and our
Yeah.
culture, and continuing to have sport be part of that positive aspect. So, thank you, sir. Love chatting, and hope to see you in person soon.
Yeah, I got to get out to a Reds game. I'll check the schedule and
Let me know.
I love Christian Rodriguez. He's a Robinson guy too, great player. And Anthony, that team is a lot of familiar players to me. So
Yeah,
I
Tristan
definitely.
Talley last night. Jim Hogan is coaching right
Oh
now.
yeah, he's one of my
Uh,
favorites. He's awesome. So
and many of the same faces. Scott Senkier's on the women's side.
yeah, Scott's great.
So
Yeah.
you gotta come on out.
Yeah, I certainly will, Coach. And
Yeah.
thanks for the kind words. I love doing it. You never know what you're going to when you're talking about giving people voices. I mean, you talk on certain mediums a lot, and you're obviously very polished at this because you have to be. But I learned also when you talk to students like Dylan Logan or young athletes, you never know what you're going to learn from people, and because they have a perspective, and I've learned the last few years sometimes talk to the athlete themselves, and I've been doing a little bit more of that. You don't want to get kids on there that can't hold a conversation. You gotta want to make them uncomfortable. But certain kids really can, and I always learn a lot when I talk to the athlete themselves. Ask them
Yeah,
questions and
I've
just let
enjoyed.
them.
I tuned into your chat with Ricky. What a
What
great
a great
kid.
kid!
Some great questions from you. I think talking about tactics and substance, right? Getting
Yeah,
down to not just, and that's why for the first part, like shift a little bit away from the league stuff because I love, I think you should have Ryan Rich on from a tech
yeah. I've always he's a great guy, great coach.
curriculum standpoint. Let's talk about what coaches
Yeah,
and clubs are doing from a content standpoint. What are you teaching out there? And
yeah,
why? And how does that connect? Why is it, different a little bit in high school? And how do we, colleges are actually recruiting this type of player. But does that shine in this sort of tactical approach? Like I love when you've had those conversations because I know you're passionate about that.
yeah.
Um, so keep it
Well,
up.
well, thanks, Coach. And I will definitely look up Coach Rodney. I've always wanted to. I thought he went to NCSL for a while, but he's back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was executive director at NCSL for 5 years, and we are thrilled that he's back.
Oh, okay.
And
Congratulations.
he's our technical director, working hand in hand with Chris Arnold,
Okay. Great guys.
Adam and team. Yeah, they do a phenomenal job with our academy.
Well, tell Chris I said hello as well.
I will.
All right. All right, Coach. Good
Julian.
talking to you, buddy.
All right. See ya.
Appreciate you. Thanks.